ladies and gentlemen, we are very thankful to AAUC to bring us together, the Asian American Unity Coalition, especially Dr. S.K. Liu. And it has been a wonderful year of engagement, and we are blessed and honored, to be a member of AAUC, Asian American Unity Coalition. Our topic today is combating Islamophobia in the United States and in relation to the Muslim American community. My name is Wajdi Saeed. I have been 34 years here in Portland, Oregon. I am a co-founder of the Muslim Education Trust, and I'm a native of Yemen. And Yemen is located in West Asia, Southwest Asia. And my colleague Jawad Khan is also going to be part of this discussion. And I'm going to do the introduction about understanding Islam and Muslims, and Jawad will cover the rest of the PowerPoint slides in Islamophobia. Jawad, did you move the second slides, please? So in 2016, the Institute for Policy has interviewed over 1,500 people. 500 and plus were Muslims, and then 330 were Jewish Americans, and then the rest were Protestant and Catholic Americans. And they came up with this poll that it tells us the reality of our existence today in our public square. And nothing changed much since 2016, rather than it became worse with our national political narrative. Today the American Muslim community is estimated at between 8 to 10 million people. The majority of American Muslims are Asians, all the way from China, Chinese Muslims, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, as well as Thailand and Cambodia and Burma. And then you come to South Asia, mostly Bangladesh, Kashmir, India, and Pakistan. And then Central Asia was mostly the Turkish-speaking world, from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, and then Turkey, and then West Asia. So the majority of the American Muslims are Asians. And then we have a large number of African-American Muslims that they were brought into slavery 500 years ago. And then they embraced Islam almost 100 years ago with the national rise of the Black supremacy group, the Nation of Islam. And then with Malcolm X, they were healed after he went to the Hajj, and he denounced, Black supremacy, and they became, joining the main Muslims. And then Arab speaking makes about 17%, and the rest are minority Muslims from here and there. They say there are 75 ethnic groups lives in America of Muslim background. Jawad? Muslims considered are the youngest of all faith groups, what we call the Abrahamic tradition group, mostly Jewish, Christians, Catholics, and as well as, Protestant. The majority of Muslims are under the age of 18 to 24 and 25 to 44. That's the youngest group that happen to be among, the Abrahamic tradition or faith group or monotheistic group. Jawad? Muslims generally, after 9/11, they favor Democrats. In the 2016, Muslims voted mostly for Hillary Clinton, and they also favored, Bernie Sanders, and few favored our current President Trump. Jawad? As we said, that Muslims today identify more Democrat than Republican, and a large number are independent. Jawad? Muslim priorities are economics, civil rights, and education. 90% of the Muslim community is well educated, with at least master's and PhD, and the large in the last 20 years, a lot of refugees came from rural areas, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia, and East Europe. Muslims report the most religious discrimination today. Almost 18% face daily discrimination in different capacities, and mostly women that report facing the largest discrimination among, the men. Go on. So 18% of Muslims, face discrimination on a daily basis. Almost 20% of that 18% are women. Muslims, reports discrimination are less optimistic, but they are also more engaged in the community. 55% of the total Muslims out of the 8 million are involved in the community affairs in different institutions. Jawad. In 2016, Muslims were satisfied with the direction of our country here, especially when President Obama spoke at the first time that he was elected. The first year he spoke from the University of Cairo in Egypt, trying to build bridges between, Muslim world and the United States. And they are now less optimistic within the presidency of President Trump. Muslims are very engaged today in the community, and the most people that are engaged are less politically. In 2016, American Muslims were able to register almost 4 million people to vote out of the 8 million, and they are an important factor today, in swing states, that vote. Used to vote for Republicans, now they vote for Democrats. What? The top 4 reasons why Muslim votes are basically civic duty. They understand that it's important that we vote, and it's very important to engage, to be able to heal and unify our public square. They want to make a difference. They want specifically to help and support candidates that are aligned with their, with their political interest. And then it is very important for them to vote, because some of them, they came from societies that are, not necessarily encourage, voting, mostly royalties or military-based dictatorship. What? The top reasons why Muslims are not voting is, my vote doesn't make a difference. You'll find that in the Chinese community, in the Indian community, and other communities. I don't like any of the people running. Today, they don't like any of the people running for an office. They had some glimpse of hope of Bernie and Andrew Yang, but today they're not interested, to vote to either of them. The issues I care about are not necessarily represented. Muslims attend, their spiritual activities inside the mosque or Islamic centers. They are the ones that are also engaged. Muslims, similar to Protestant religious patterns, Muslim community, 87% are attending, their religious holidays and their weekly or daily or annually in the high seasons, similar to the Protestant community. Go ahead, Joel.
Protestants, Muslims most likely to favor role for the religion in law. And you can see this, that there is a civic connection that Muslims have, even though they don't feel, as you saw from the previous slides, that they don't feel that there's a role for them. because people haven't treated them as such. But you can see from the polling that both Protestants and Muslims voted the highest, that it was the main source for them in favor of rule for the religion and law. You want to continue? Or?
Yeah, go ahead, Joel. Yeah.
So American faith groups share strong religious and American identities, strong religious identity, strong American identity. As you can see here, Muslims are very similar between strong religious identities and strong Muslim identity. One of the aspects of Islamophobia is that you cannot be Muslim and American at the same time, but this polling showed that it was quite different actually, and that they could be both and identify as both. Muslims with strong religious identities are more likely to have strong American identities, as opposed to the opposite, where many people have Islamophobically believed that the stronger someone believes in one's religious identity or Islamic identity or Muslim identity, then the less that he or she can identify with their nationality as an American. Muslims most likely faith group to reject military attacks on civilians. This is a core concept in Islam, that that people who are not combatants, people who are not part, must be treated as such with respect. And this goes back all the way to our Prophet Muhammad's teachings 1400 years ago. Some of the key findings: of Muslims lean democratic, Muslims engage in community, and less politically, are pious and patriotic, reject attacks on civilians, masjid or mosque attendance linked to civic engagement, and avoidance of radicalization. Muslims wary of discrimination, but optimistic. Brother Wajdi?
Yeah, go ahead, sir. The next.
And Muslims in America.
So as I said earlier, there are 8.5 million Muslims in North America. Around of 20 to 25,000 lives in the Portland metropolitan, mostly indigenous and immigrant. The indigenous people, Native American as well as African American, that embraced Islam after Malcolm X went to the Hajj. They joined mainstream Islam. There are about almost 19 Islamic centers today in the metropolitan area in Portland, and then there are 3 that are in different cities in the state. 25% of West Asian Arab-speaking Muslims, and then there are 25% of Somalis today, and then South Asia, mostly Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Kashmir, makes about 25%. And then the rest are African American and North African and East African from Kenya and Uganda as well in Portland, Oregon. Joel? Mostly the educated, 90% of the Muslim community, as I said earlier, 90% are educated, and most of them, they work in the high-tech industry, in Intel Techtronics, Microsoft. Most of them also in the field of medicine or research, within medical researches. And the most popular institutions here that address the medical needs is the Oregon Health Sciences University and Legacy Emmanuel. They always pursue higher education and encourage their kids, to do so. The growing population of Muslims are now refugees, mostly from Iraq, Somalia, Bosnia, and Afghanistan. Challenges facing Muslims today is the language barrier, cultural and youth generation gap between those that born over here and their parents and grandparents, and then positive assimilation. Our center here, the Muslim Education Trust, we are an educational cultural institution. We champion what's called positive integration, or what we call integration by design. Nothing wrong to be a Somali, nothing wrong to be an Afghan or Chinese or Indian or Pakistanis, but you have to be an American and also to be a Muslim as well. And being a Muslim and being an American doesn't contradict each other. We serve, over 45 ethnic groups today here at the Trust. We try as much as we can, even with the COVID-19, to reach out to the Muslim community through different services and online, and then also with the physical social distancing. We have over 54 interfaith organizations as well that we help to engage and to appreciate where Islam today in the Portland metropolitan is accepted as a mainstream faith and a mainstream community. Go ahead, Jawad. We co-founded several organizations because we believe in civic engagement. We believe in healing and unifying. We believe in civic engagement and respect of others, and also for others to understand the true image of Islam, where Islam for 900 years has been a positive, engaging, created civilizations and cities of light and centers of civilizations in Asia and Africa and southern part of Europe, especially in Spain. When history was misnamed the Dark Ages, it wasn't dark for the world of Islam, it was dark for the European peninsula. What? Today we have, engaged, over 45 organizations, as we mentioned earlier, whether in the higher education or church-based or faith-based or secular and civic, based organization. What? Islam is a religion, as we always say, a religion of peace, a religion of faith, a religion of loving and caring. Muslims, ruled, for 900 years ago, India, 900 years in India. The majority of Indians still are Hindus, irrespective, of the discrimination and the challenges that Muslims today face, in some part of Asia, in Burma and Myanmar and other places. Islam combined both, life and faith, and we look at life in a very, holistic way. What? Our faith, the faith of Islam, guides every single part of our life and doesn't contradict our commitment, to the public or the private. Life is better with faith. Muslims believe in the unity and the monotheism, pure monotheism of God, our Creator. Is the same God that revealed, to Moses, Jesus, and all of the Torah and the Gospel and the Quran prophets. We believe in all the holy books, the sacred books that revealed, in the monotheistic faiths. We believe in all the prophets. We believe in the unseen creation of God. We believe that there is life after this life. It's called, the life in heaven. We believe in God's decree, and we believe in the diversity of God's creation, that all of us are equal in front of God. What? We have dietary restrictions. We don't consume alcohol. We don't eat pork or any derivatives of pork. We don't eat any dead animal or animals with claws, or what we call, scavengers animals, or with sharp teeth, carnivores. Muslims won't eat any food that has touched pork. Muslims wouldn't eat anything that has any pork derivative. This way is called the halal way, or the permissible way. That is called the nutritious, lawful way. What? For any information about the Muslim Education Trust, we'll be happy to engage in higher grounds, and now with Jawad in Islamophobia in the United States.
All right. Thank you, Brother Wajdi. So at the beginning, there was a discussion about what should be the definition of Islamophobia, and there was a consensus that people came to, and it is to the fear of Islam, and by extension Muslims, as well as hostility towards Islam and Muslims, that tends to dehumanize and it's the entire faith, and portraying all its adherents as fundamentally, and its tenets as fundamentally alien, and attributing to its followers an inherent essential set of negative traits such as irrationality, barbarism, intolerance, and violence. Now, once these attributes had been set and had been propagated and promulgated through the media, these ideas set hold, and they were further perpetuated by TV shows, movies, and in the common media until people have thought about these things as the truth. And in that, people became, the way that they dealt with others or they approached other people, Muslims, that they became suspicious, that they follow these values that have been ascribed to us, which aren't true. There are key tenets of Islamophobia. The first one is that Islam and Muslims are monolithic and static and unresponsive to change. Now, when you think of anything that is broad and has many adherents, many people involved with it, nothing is monolithic. Even in a family, when you have 3 siblings and you're remembering a family memory that you have, or you went on a vacation, your brother or sister remembers it a little bit differently than you do. Now, Islam is seen as monolithic, allows for people who are Islamophobic to ascribe to it an unchanging, static view of something simplistic and antithetical to the views of the Western world, whatever the Western world is. But nothing is monolithic. 1.8 to 2 billion adherents that span, as Brother Wajdi was mentioning, from Southeast Asia to South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia, Southwest Asia, West Asia, Europe, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and then into the New World, into the Americas. Nothing can be monolithic. There are so many different ways that Muslims engage. There are some things, as in Brother Wajdi is mentioning, of the things that Muslims believe, those things are common to people. But so many of the different customs and the way that the world is looked at is different for something that spans such a wide region. A second aspect of Islamophobia is that Islam is seen as separate and other, meaning that you have the world, which is the European world, and then you have the satellites of the European world and its values. Islam is separate and other from them. When something is separate and other, as we have seen in recent months, then it becomes easy to target it and to set it out for discrimination. Another key aspect of Islamophobia is that Islam is seen as inferior to the Western world. And this aspect is keyed upon often because the people who are Islamophobic and propagate Islamophobia, they use this as a way to show, look at this world. This is what they've created, is what we've created. And this is why it failed, because its values itself made it fail. Islam as the enemy and Islam as manipulative. We saw this especially at the time of President Obama. If you remember, at the time when President Obama was in office, there were people who were very much against his election, very much against him as president. They discussed how he was secretly a Muslim, and then that he was using his power to establish other Sharia law or whatever else it was. But this is a key tenet of Islamophobia, that it's the enemy, it's manipulative, and whatever it's doing, it's used to overthrow Western governments and establish its rule. And lastly, Islam is seen as violent, aggressive, threatening. After the 9/11 attacks in New York and Washington, one of the key components that were promulgated of Islamophobia was that Muslims were nihilistic and that they didn't believe that this world had anything to do with them, and therefore they reacted to things violently and aggressively and threateningly to get the things that they wanted, and that this was a core tenet of the faith, when in reality the Quran and then the model that Muslims all follow the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was the opposite of this, as we saw in the one of the slides that talked about non-combatants in a time of war and how they had to be treated. There's actually a really good documentary, and it's called Real Bad Arabs, and the real is a homophone, real as in movie real. And it discusses about how Muslims and Arabs have been vilified throughout movies and have established in the Western conscious mind about this aggressiveness and violentness and nihilistic and infantile behavior, which then becomes easy to demonize because children, when they watch cartoons or movies or read books, when they have these images of Islam in them, then they begin to think of that world that way, and propagating that becomes even easier. We saw after 9/11, we saw some of this anti-Muslim graffiti, and we've seen this is a historic past that just happened recently, but we've seen this in the United States, this historic past from the people who were brought against their will here as slaves. We saw this with the Chinese, who built the railroads, built large parts of the Western United States. And then after they built the railroads, the Chinese Exclusion Act was sent. And we saw in Chinatowns this type of graffiti. We saw it against the Irish. We saw it against the Italians. We saw it against the Jews. We saw it against other recent immigrants. And now Muslims have been the target in a long history that we've seen. These are some of the demographics that Brother Wajdi mentioned, and I don't have to go over that again. Now, after 9/11, it was before 9/11 anyway, as these Islamophobic tenets had clawed their way into the Western conscience, and not by accident, it was by design. But the narrative developed, especially after 9/11. Muslims and Arabs, Southwest Muslims, from the Levant, from the Gulf, South Asians, and oftentimes people couldn't even tell the difference. Some were Muslim, some were Sikh, but they looked like something like this. They were Arab, they were South Asian, they're from West Asia, South Asia, etc. But they were these Muslims. They were blamed for the terrorist attacks on the US soil. And the country failed to stop anti-Muslim racism before it became mainstream. And during the subsequent war on terror, Muslim students, workers, employees, they were targeted. And because they were targeted, it became normalized. Some Americans joined in the blaming of Muslims or excused Islamophobia as a rational response to a national emergency after what happened in New York, Washington, D.C. on 9/11. And then many remained silent. Now, we saw the very same things throughout our history's past, the United States history's past. We saw this with the Japanese internment in Order 1066. And this order, the people thought it was a rational response. It didn't matter to people that you had people of Japanese descent who had been in the Western United States, had been a central, integral part of building societies, and towns, farming, and eventually did fight in World War II. It didn't matter to them. They were interned, people didn't speak up. And so what happened? For Muslims, same thing happened. People didn't speak up about the Patriot Act. And it was only until 2017 when you saw some people react. Finally, when the Muslim ban, still in effect, took place and was put in by another executive order by the current president's administration. But by that time, Islamophobia had been normalized. And we saw this during this COVID-19 pandemic. You had people who were irrationally blaming people who visually looked Eastern Asian, Southeast Asian in appearance and blamed them for something that had nothing to do with them. Nobody spoke up. There were many attacks against older citizens, still happening, and we've seen it, and nobody spoke up. And it was normalized and it was rationalized. Oh, because this happened, so much has happened. Okay, we're going to react this way. And we didn't get 100th of the type of reaction as we've seen from other types of racism, but we didn't see that. And we didn't see that same type of reaction. So it became normalized. And it happened. We had people who died, who were beaten, who were mugged. And the same thing happened to Muslims. Nobody spoke up until it became normalized. By 2017, it was too late because it was already conscious and subconscious to people. Life in the Muslim, since 9/11, there's a lot of data that's out there about some of the things that have happened. People have acted suspicious of you, been called offensive names, been singled out by airport security, been threatened or attacked. This was research that was done 9 years ago. I'm going to have some updated data from the FBI here in a second. But this was on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. The 20th anniversary will be next year of 9/11, and this was done by Pew Research. Religious prejudice against Muslims. More than 4 in 10 Americans, 43%, admit to feeling at least a little prejudice towards Muslims, and more than twice the number who say that about Christians. Now, 43% is almost half. 9% a great deal, 20% some, 14% a little. Now, we know that we've seen from the polling data of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, a lot of people didn't want to admit that they voted for Donald Trump. And so the data was skewed. That's why the polls were skewed. Most people don't like to admit in a poll that they are bigoted or that they are biased or that they're racist or xenophobic. So this 43% is probably more than 43% and probably verges on more than 50%. That is half of the American population who feel some prejudice towards Muslim. Now think about that for Muslims. The majority who are South Asian, or people can't tell one from another in this country often, half of the people feel prejudice, some prejudice. These are our police officers. These are our healthcare workers, our doctors, our nurses. These are our neighbors whom we live with. These are our teachers. These are our supervisors. These are our professors. These are our emergency trained people who come in cases of fires and earthquakes. These are our lawmakers. For Muslims, we think that half the people are prejudiced against us. And that affects us a great deal. But this is the reality in the United States that very few people know about. And the issue isn't discussed. Islam is the most negatively viewed. This was alluded to in the other slide that was briefly mentioned. Nearly 1/3 Americans say their opinion of Islam is not favorable at all. And if you look at Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity, it doesn't come close to 31%. 22% say not too favorable. So 53% total say either not favorable at all or not too favorable. And again, that leads into what people think about the religious prejudice against us. Muslims have now internalized Islamophobia, and the negative media coverage is to blame. According to a newly released report, this was a few years ago, by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, it's a think tank in Washington, D.C., Muslims are more likely than members of other faith groups to agree with the sentiment that their community is, quote unquote, more prone to negative behavior than other people, at 30%, compared with 13% of Jews and 12% of Catholics, and even less for other people. 30%, almost 1 in 3, that they feel themselves. The greatest percentage of these people were people 16 to 24 years old. And many of them have been born here in the United States, and they have experienced an internalized Islamophobia, just like people internalize other forms of racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, and many of the Muslims here are Asian themselves. And so you have that interconnection between them. and that connectivity. Muslims most likely to believe co-religions are more prone to negative behavior, as you see, 30%. White evangelicals were 11%. Non-affiliated, who did not affiliate with any particular religion, were at 7%, were at the least. The study also found that 1 in 3 children surveyed wanted to tell others that they are Muslim. Only 1 in 3. Can you imagine that? Only 1 in 3 felt comfortable telling other people that they were Muslim. Now, obviously, some can't hide that fact because of their name, or that they may be wearing the headscarf, which is why Muslim women face more discrimination than anyone, because of the most easily identified as Muslim with the headscarf. But 1 in 3 did not want to say that they were Muslim. 1 in 3 wanted to say that they were, and 1 in 2 did not know whether they could be both Muslim and American, because people and the media told them you can't, because the values of Islam are antithetical and diametrically opposed to the values of the Western world, whatever that Western world is. And it was either direct or it was subconscious through the media. Now, there was a separate study conducted by the ISPU. This was a year ago, found that Muslims accused of plotting violence get 7 times as much media attention and sentences 4 times as longer as non-Muslim plotters. And we've seen in the media, when people find out that there's a Muslim name involved, or a possible Muslim name, or a possible Muslim connection, then the media attention is so much greater and so much more. And you see it on CNN with the red and the breaking news. And this is what Muslims have been facing. We gave a presentation earlier, a colleague of mine, also on the board of directors here at the Muslim Educational Trust. And at the school here in the Portland metro area, there was a large group of Muslim students. And the principal was saying that they were having a problem with expressing their identity. Now, can you imagine if you were on the media, or if you were on CNN, or you were on the internet, and you never saw something positive about your faith there? Of course you're going to have these thoughts. You never see anything positive about Muslims. And if something is there about Muslims, then it's going to be something that's negative. And when you see something that's negative, then you're more likely to, well, internalize that. And then that works outwardly to your own belief systems. On a scale from 0 to 100, with 0 being the lowest level of prejudice, the report found that on average, Muslims scored 17 on the Islamophobia index. By comparison, non-affiliated respondents came in at 14, which was lower than Muslims themselves, because young Muslims, 16 to 24, had been told that their faith was so and so and so. And then this Islamophobia, which is not an accident, but is actually a $250 million industry, which we'll get to here in a second, had convinced them of that. And because of that, they began seeing themselves like that. Jews and Catholics scored a 22 on ISPU's index, the general public 24, Protestants 31, and white evangelicals a score of 40. We have a gradient, and this is the same gradient that applies to anyone else in the history of this country who had to face racism and bigotry and xenophobia. It starts with prejudicial stereotyping. And for Muslims, there are all the things that we talked about in the beginning that are ascribed to Muslims, that are inherent, supposedly, about our faith. And that stereotyping allows people to begin to look at others negatively, and then also becomes easier then to be racist against them. It becomes easier for them to slander them and attack them in the media, because no one is going to come to the defense. So it becomes open game. And then that escalates into alienation from discrimination, profiling, bugging of houses, police stops, and eventually into hate crimes, verbal assault, vandalism, and murder. And we saw that here recently. You may have seen on the news that there was 3 years ago on the MAX, our public transport system here, there was a racial attack where a man had murdered two people who had come to the defense of a young Muslim girl and her friend on the Max and public transport. And that was 3 years ago. A lot of people may think, well, that's Portland. Portland is the hub of certain type of liberalism, but this happened here and we had the third anniversary attack of that. But that's what happens when you have this gradient. And the same thing that we can said about the way that the COVID response was racialized into East Asians. This prejudicial stereotype, nobody standing up for anybody, allowed people to act this way, to attack DoorDash drivers, to attack businesses, and to attack vulnerable people. And Muslims have been facing this for the past 4 years, especially heightened Islamophobic attacks. And we have this dirty dozen of people who have been promulgating Islamophobia and have been spreading it, which I'll get to here in a second. And so we've had hate crimes and harassment rose sharply after 9/11. The fairness and accuracy in reporting make Islamophobia mainstream. It started off in 2011 as $42.6 million industry. Now in 2016, reported by the Council of American Islamic Relations, it was $205 million industry. And that includes media ads for election. It includes through advertisements, through policy making, through movies, through TV shows, and spread far and wide to talk radio, which has been very influential, and of course to books that have been published about this. As of 2017, there were 2,599 total recorded acts, from harassment, customs and border patrol hate crimes, and employment discrimination. In 2018, it had risen to 3,115. And then last year is even more, to 3,335. We'll see for 2020, there might be fewer because people have been inside due to COVID, but these actions are there. And you can see this in CARE's website. They have been documented in their Islamophobia section of their website, each one of the particular incidents of Islamophobia. You have a growing result of a clash of civilizations, bias and hostility towards Muslim and Islam, and a burning of bridges and defensive and intimidating dialogues, all planted with that seed of what Islam is. And a lot of the effects that we see of people is that they feel alienation, they feel shy of expressing their Muslim identity, they want to change their names. It reflects poorly in behavior in academics in school, and also their positive integration in the system while maintaining the cultural identity fails unless there are active measures. As Brother Wesley mentioned, part of what we did at the Muslim Educational Trust is to integrate everyone into society and make us feel that we are part of society. But people, when they look at you as you're not American, then people don't tend to feel that they are American. For example, my parents, they did not really, they were naturalized citizens, and they were from India. I was born here in Texas. They didn't see themselves as Americans. I asked them, well, you're naturalized citizens, and why don't you see yourself as Americans? Well, nobody else considered us Americans. And when no one else considers you American, then you tend not to see yourself as that, because you always see yourself as the other, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And some of the solutions that we have is to study the history of Islam, which is based on love and humanity, and understand the relevance of Islam civilization to the history of whatever the Western world is, whatever we call the Western world. And part of this is that in the history of the Western world, how it developed through the Renaissance, through the Protestant Reformation, through the growing of the middle class, the Industrial Revolution, and into the 1900s, that could not have happened without Islam. When the Crusaders went into the Islamic world, they actually went into and saw the libraries and the houses of knowledge and brought back a lot of the texts that had been lost to Europe. The works of Aristotle, of Socrates, of the Greek mathematicians that had been lost. And they also brought back the works of Muslims and Muslim scholars and mathematicians and scientists. And that in part led to the Renaissance and the reflowering of Europe. And affirm, create mutually respective dialogues, which we have worked here at the Muslim Educational Trust to do, and affirm our reality of Islam and deny the distortions, and which is one of the things that education, its purpose is, because we want to control our own narrative. Oftentimes other people control the narrative for us, and they inherently ascribe to Islam negative traits and qualities, or things that we don't do, the negations, that we don't drink or don't eat pork. And that's different from that. Some of the things that we can do is that we can document acts that have been done, that you've seen. And there is a report, Islamophobia. I'm going to share the link here. Report Islamophobic content. You can either do, the CARE has one, and there's also one from the Berkeley Center. And it is a way to report Islamophobic incidences that you've seen. And it can be from elected officials, it can be from law enforcement, it can be from people in power, it can be from the corporate world. And we can also support local and regional and national Muslim organizations. I supplied some resources here on Islamophobia. One of the great books that we had a speaker here at the Muslim Educational Trust. His name is Todd Green. He wrote The Fear of Islam and Presumed Guilty. Excellent, excellent books. There is a website called Islamophobia.org that has documented all the Islamophobic hate crimes over the last 5 years. And you can go see, and through that. And here are some of the people that we've seen that have been promulgating this Islamophobic content. One of the things that we also like to do is we like to see the beautiful and broad beauty that there is in Islam, that people think a Muslim looks like something, but a Muslim looks like everybody. We have here an example of a person who may look like she's Muslim, but she's actually Russian Orthodox. Here we have an Indonesian Muslim. Here we have an Egyptian Muslim. Here's a person who's white, he converted to Islam. Here we have a person who is African American and Muslim, a Bosnian Muslim. This is Iman and David Bowie. Iman is Somali and a Muslim. Here's someone who's Nigerian Orthodox, who people may think looks Muslim but isn't. Somali Muslim. This is a Uyghur Muslim. And what's happening in the Uyghur world in Xinjiang. This person is actually a Coptic Christian. He was the head of the Coptic Christian church in Egypt, but many people would think, well, you know, he looks like he's Muslim. This is a Muslim from the UAE. This is also a Uyghur Muslim. This is a Sikh woman. This is a girl who is from Russia. She is a Muslim. She is from Tatarstan. This is Suhaib Webb. He's a white American who converted to Islam. This is Rasputin from Russia. He wasn't a Muslim. Dave Chappelle was a Muslim convert. This is a Sikh young man. This is a Russian Orthodox. These are Muslim from India at a wedding, and these are Sikhs at a funeral. So Islam and Muslims look different. They span the globe. It is not one monolith, like we said at the beginning, but a beautiful diversity that ranges from across the world in all continents. So I want to end with that, and I want to leave the rest of the time for question and answers.
Thank you very much, Jawad, and thank you very much, SK and Anthony and all the team at Civic Leadership USA and AAC. It was a historical moment for us, to join you a year ago in Washington, D.C. and then in Las Vegas. And we're very thankful to Sandy Chow, Mr. Sandy Chow Dr. Chow for healing our world through philanthropy. And this PowerPoint is developed by the Muslim Education Trust. We'll share it with everybody. We'll send it to you, Anthony and SK, to share it to each one of us. The Islamophobia network is not a new network. It has addressed, our country here. It's built in the genocide of the indigenous people and the African slavery, and it repeats itself. Hate and bigotry repeats itself in different colors. Yesterday the indigenous people and the African, the Chinese, the Japanese, and so many others. Hi, Sandy. It's always nice to see you. And it repeats itself unless we collectively come together in a loving, responsible way, and we integrate by design, our work. We are not going, to succeed and to claim the narrative in our public square. We were excited to see Andrew Yang running, and we were looking forward for many others to run, in the near future, unless we come together collectively and integrate by design the resources and become so sensitive, that Asia is not anymore how it defined itself, in the past, the East Asia. Asia is a beautiful continent. It reflects in every single corner of this great continent, where the East meet the West and the North meet the South. And this is the beauty. Half of Asia is Muslim today, and I think it's very important for us to always reflect on that, that we want to heal and unify our home first, and then to worry about our neighbors together. We are open for questions and answers. We're open also for feedback, and don't be shy. We are not here to be to be shy. We want to really move forward, where we claim the public square and we claim our narrative and our role as human beings. If you unmute yourself, Dr. Chow.
Oh, this is really a wonderful presentation, and then with so much information and so much diversity, it's a really teaching for myself and learning. And then I really always amazed how diverse the Muslim groups are all over the nation, and then across the whole globe, and then it's so diverse. I mean, just for myself, as a Chinese Americans, we find out even though we speak the same language, and that we're very concentrated in one place, but somehow in America, we're still very diverse. We have people here been generations, and then we have people all over scattered in the rest of the world, mostly in South Asia, and then people from Taiwan, people from Hong Kong, and then in this case, even within ourselves, we have a lot of difficulties to unify people from different backgrounds and socioeconomic segments. It's extremely difficult to unify ourselves and have a common voice. And then among the Muslim Americans, I would say with such diversity, I mean, what do you see the challenge of unify all the Muslims together and they have some common voice?
So in my 34 years, I came as a young man from Yemen. I'm a native of Yemen, Southwest Asia. And, I saw a lot of positive progress within the creation of the Muslim Education Trust. We tend, to be inclusive, to be welcoming everyone, including, our friends from the larger community, irrespective of their religiosity. but we also integrated by design, our programs where where our board reflects the diversity of the Muslim community. So it's very important that we bring, people that, speak the language and the culture of this different ethnic groups. So we serve today about 45 ethnic groups here, 72 languages in our campus. We have a school program, but we have a community center and cultural work, and we do some of the secular work as well to be inclusive. Not all Muslims are practicing of the faith, and I think it's very important that we welcome each one of them as far as they will contribute in a positive way to the advance to our mission statement. So we are succeed today. There are room for improvement, and we do civic engagement. We do almost every year we have a major voter registration. We have today 3 candidates that happen to be Muslims in the metropolitan area. We have somebody running for judge, another running for city council, and another running for county commission, board of commission. So we have made progress in my lifetime here in Portland, in my 34 years. So we still have some challenges, because some of us tend to be ultra spicy, and so we have the mild and the moderate and the spicy person, and we try to keep that discussion, healthy and through what we call shura, or mutual conduct. Jawad, do you want to add anything to that part? Mute yourself, Jawad.
Yeah, I think you touched on most of it, but to answer your question, Dr. Chow, it's not easy for anything, because no matter what you have different ideas of how things should be, and bringing all those things together and all those pieces together, it's not easy. But we've been pretty successful here at the Muslim Educational Trust. Have something that provides and moves things forward. But the progress and the work still remains. When we saw this anti-Asian discrimination this year, following the outbreak of COVID, this was a very weak and terrible response that we had, and it should be not acceptable that people did that, and it wasn't even broadcast or talked about as much. When Muslims were discriminated against, it wasn't broadcast or talked about as much. So we come together and be supportive of each other, because one type of discrimination today is somebody else's type of discrimination tomorrow.
Jawad, do you want to go back? We have created different coalitions, and this coalition now has been really the best ever contribution, that we co-founded, the Interfaith Council of Greater Portland, the Oregon Common Table, the Arab and Jewish Muslim Dialogue, the Institute for Christian Muslim Understanding. All of this civic organization and faith-based organization, if you can go to the partners, Jawad. It has been really a blessing, that now today, in a matter of a fraction of a second, that we can attract almost 75 leaders of different backgrounds to come and support our work, or the Chinese community work, or the Japanese, or the African American, So, it has been a blessing, to this integration. One of our great founders, he was the founding dean of the College of Urban Planning. He came from Columbia University, Dr. Nuhad Toulan, N-O-H-A-D, Nuhad Toulan. He was able, to integrate, through his urban planning mind, so many of these ideas that you see today here at the Trust. And we are helping other communities rather than building the, mosques, in the traditional way. They need to build, community centers the way that the Trust, the Muslim Education Trust, is built. And we have able to influence, 5 cities to change their mind, from building a mosque into a community, cultural center, to be able to be inclusive, and to be able to defeat Islamophobia, and to be able to integrate, in a positive way by design, the newcomers, or what we call the new Americans.
Mhm.
We hope you answered your question, Dr. Chow. If anybody wants to ask any
No,
question,
well, I'll put it this way. I'm not quite a PhD myself, but somehow my feeling is just the sometimes I think even among our own people from the north and people from the south, because of lack of understanding and then behavior, and then we just kind of afraid of each other, and some have some stereotyping and assumptions of other people because you just generalize it. So therefore, basically, among the Muslims was such a diverse group, and then also in terms of definition of certain emphasis of faith, and then it's very hard. Let me tell you some of my experience that I did about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago. I cumulatively go out and raise money enough to build 20 primary school in the Muslim country in China. And then by going through, I took people from different faith, Catholic, Mormon, Christians, and then Buddhism, and then just go over there. Just instead of talking about religious reality, we just talk about the common good. The common good is also you care about each other, and then you want to be their friends, and I always consider when people consider you a friend, we are more accepted to different opinion and different viewpoints, and then and all of a sudden because of the ability to understand each other more, it just really lowered the barrier of communication, and then but somehow it's just that I don't know, but somehow it's just I think even among the Muslims, there are different sections sect that they don't really interface with each other. But somehow my feeling is that United States, can you overcome that, and then maybe working with some common good and common value? So in such a case, a lot of the barrier could be broken. So therefore, there will be more unification.
In different cities, we have succeeded as the American Muslim community. Like Portland, we have succeeded big time. There are cities that needs help and support, but generally speaking, today the American Muslim community is well integrated in Portland, Oregon, and we are focusing now on the national narrative. We have created different seminars and webinars. With the COVID-19, we always find strength in during weak times or negative times. So and I hope by 2024 we will have more candidates running for an office for the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress as well.
This is wonderful. If possible, allow me or allow my colleagues to participate some of your functions, and then to be frank with you.
We are blessed to have Dr. Sakwan Lu to visit our center, and we gathered all the Asians leadership here. Almost 24 leaders came to our center, and we had lunch.
Yes,
Dr. Sakwan, and we welcomed our brother Anthony Ng, and we will be happy to host you, Dr. our dear brother Sandy, to come here to Portland, Oregon. And
Yes.
we have made progress today. You know, there are room for improvements, and we want, you know, the national narrative, you know, to become more positive, you know, in the Asian community of the East and the West and North and South as well.
Very good. Really.
We are an official
great
members now
presentation.
today at the AUC. The Muslim Education Trust
Yes.
is an official member.
I'm so enriched by your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else to have? Good.
All right.
We will send the slides, you know,
Actually,
to
bye
both
bye.
of you, Anthony and
Thanks.
SK, and then you can share it with everybody.
Thank you, Raji.
Thanks, Eng.
Thank you, Anthony.
And we'll come visit you definitely as soon as the shelter in place come down.
You know, it will come down, God willing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks, SK.